Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. An eventful Singapore Grand Prix is over. Sergio Perez is the winner, but Ferrari are adamant that Leclerc should be declared the winner of this particular race after two alleged safety car infringements, which seemingly the FIA has dismissed as not a particularly big deal. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's break down the race again because it was incredibly chaotic. First of all, it was raining a lot before the race was actually meant to begin. It was delayed by over an hour, and I think understandably people were saying, hang on a second here lads, why not just get the race underway a little bit quicker, use the wet tyres? Like, why don't they love to use the wet tyres? Now of course, as it turns out here in Singapore, it's incredibly humid, and of course with no sun or anything, it takes ages to actually dry up the track. So in the end we did get a rather interesting race from a strategic perspective when there was going to be a crossover point. Nobody knew really when it was going to be, and if it had started on wet, the race might have been less interesting because maybe we never get DRS, which seemingly the race directors were not even willing to do regardless. Now, George Russell ended up starting from the back, entirely new power unit, actually started from the pit lane, but well, it put him in a rather difficult position the entire race, and when George is at the back of the grid, often he makes some rather speculative overtake attempts, let's just say, that didn't really pay off for him. So this is what it looked like before the race began. I mean, look at the stands here, absolutely flooded, the track was flooded as well, and they decided we don't want a Monaco or it's absolute chaos at the start, so let's just delay the race. But it does make you wonder, like, do they even want to use the wet tyres anymore? Because they could have started a bit earlier and used the wets, but they seemingly didn't want to do it. But regardless, the race began anyway, usually on, well, seemingly on intermediates. There was some discussion early on with Hamilton actually saying that he wanted, I think he was potentially talking about using like an older set of intermediates that had a different like tread on them, so maybe they get a bit more grip off the line and stuff like this. But yeah, the race begins. Hamilton actually probably got the best getaway of anyone, but it was in the second phase on this side of the track where both Leclerc and Hamilton, I think they ran into some standing water and then lost a bit of traction. So Perez and Sainz make their way through, and you can actually see here in the background, Max Verstappen from 8th on the grid had a terrible start, bottomed down, or like he effectively almost went into anti-stall. He goes down, I believe, to 12th on the opening lap, but Perez into the lead into turn 1. Pretty much that's where he would stay for the rest of the race. There was some talk with Hamilton early on about the situation with the tyres, and also saying there was really no grip. And this Mercedes is just like really bad in these type of conditions. When the track is damp and it's difficult to get the tyres up to temperature, so it was relatively clear early on that Hamilton was not going to be challenging for any sort of victory. Now, Nick Latifi, man, he's done it again. This was just so frustrating to watch, right? Zhou is coming up for an overtaking opportunity up the outside of, I believe this is into, what, turn 4, and Latifi just doesn't see him, just completely cuts him off, breaks his car. Latifi, his car's broken as well, both out of the race. Latifi actually given a 5-place grid penalty for that one at the Japanese Grand Prix, so I guess that's going to be P20 to P20. That was the first of many incidents. The second one, I was really frustrated to see this because Alonso was doing a great job holding up Verstappen. Like, look, it's Singapore with no DRS. It's going to be, you know, difficult to make passes at the best of times. But Alonso, again, man, honestly, the amount of points he's lost this season, he reckons he's lost about 60 points this season off mechanical issues and the like. This was another one, his 350th Grand Prix in his career, breaking the records. He's had a great season as well individually, but again, his car blows up and he has to retire. And then just a few laps later, the other Alpine blows up and has to retire as well. This does really blow open the race for, you know, between McLaren and Alpine, the constructors. Now, both of these instances was like safety car, virtual safety car, there was never a few laps in a row of clean racing. And finally, when the safety car ended, Hamilton was behind Sainz, and immediately it was Perez and Leclerc that were just pulling a gap. Sainz, I don't know where his pace was today, but it wasn't particularly good, and Hamilton was getting really frustrated, stuck behind him, and he thought, okay, I've got to try and make something happen. Locks up, goes into the wall, as in fairness many drivers did. Surprised in fairness he didn't get more damage than he actually did here, and he was lucky in the sense that he was coming up to his pit stop so he could pit for slicks, as it turned out to be on about lap 33, put a new front wing on, and obviously lost out pretty badly, but it wasn't the end of the world for him as it was for Yuki Tsunoda, that we'll see here in just a second. But yeah, Hamilton, this was really his key mistake because yes, he was stuck behind Sainz, but there still was a podium on if Mercedes got the overcut undercut question correct. Probably the play was to do the overcut in this race. It seemed to work out for Perez on Leclerc, stay out on the inters for one more lap, then pit. So if Sainz pitted before Hamilton probably gets P3 and maybe can hang on to it, but he just wasn't really going to get past on track because the conditions out there, the fact that if you go off the racing line, there really is no grip on the wet section, the DRS wasn't active for a very long period of time, so it was a frustrating afternoon for many drivers. Yuki Tsunoda, man, like honestly, I cannot believe the amount of times this guy comes out of the pit on new tyres and just slams it straight into the wall. He did it again here. This was a full safety cars. This really brought Verstappen back into play because both times he'd been stuck behind traffic and, ended up falling way behind the leader. There was still a chance that Verstappen could have made something happen, but as he tries to make a move on Norris, locks up massively here. Of course, this is what happens. You go off the racing line to try and make a move happen. You know, you hit a bit of standing water. The tyres, like, you're going to have to put so much force into the brakes. The tyres don't handle it. And, yeah, he locks up, goes off into the escape road and has to pit for new tyres because he just completely destroyed these mediums, pits onto softs, makes a good recovery. But at the front of the field after the safety car, Leclerc was really pushing Perez for the win. He was, really closing up. Perez did a great job defending and then honestly just dominated Leclerc at the end of the race. I think, again, it seemed to be a tyre degradation issue where Leclerc fell back from half a second behind to 7.5 seconds behind at the end of the race. But during all these VSCs, safety cars, everything that was going on, there were questions being raised about Sergio Perez's conduct right behind these VSCs. There is a rule in place where you have to stay within 10 car lengths of the safety car in front, and also because he went behind the safety car at one point and tried to hurry him along because, Perez, of course, it's in his interest to get things going a little bit quicker. He can drive faster, warm up his tyres a little bit more. Of course, the safety car, though, wants to ensure the safety and ensure the cars are backed up for Yuki Tsunoda's car to be removed. There's no issues with cars going into marshals and the like. So the safety car is its own interest. Perez was trying to hurry it along a little bit, and also it was dropping back a long way from the safety car to then make sure he can put extra energy into his tyres. So all the while this was going on, the FIA then said, okay, we're going to investigate Perez for this, but we're going to do so after the race. So hang on a second, just figure it out now so you can tell us when the race concludes what's going to happen here. It seemed at the end of the race that Hamilton just surprisingly didn't really have the pace on those medium tyres behind the two Aston Martins. It looked like Hamilton might be able to fight his way back up to, I don't know, P5 or something seemed to be on the cards. Just didn't have the pace at the end of the race. Tried a move down the inside of Vettel into turn, I think it was into turn 7 or turn 8 or whatever, and just going off the racing line there onto the wet stuff. Like, he wasn't going to be at the move stick. He made an attempt. Verstappen eventually does get Vettel to finish P7, but it is actually Sergio Perez that wins for Red Bull. What a masterful performance from Perez from start to finish. Honestly, fantastic weekend for him on the whole. Qualified very well also. Around street tracks, man, this guy is built different. Wins Monaco, wins Singapore. Incredibly impressive performance. And it really was just great to see for Perez after receiving a lot of criticism over the last few races to bounce back and perform like this. Incredibly impressive. And putting that gap on Leclerc up to 7.5 seconds, that was potentially going to be crucial if penalties did start to come his way. Sainz a long way back. Then Norris P4. Great drive from him. At a time it almost looked like he was going to get Sainz. Then Riccardo, long way behind. Stroll, Verstappen, Vettel, Hamilton, Gasly rounding out the points. And then so many DNFs. I didn't even mention Albon crashing out, but he managed to do that as well early on in the race as well. So lot of discussion, of course, around this race. But the key point then was, okay, is Perez actually going to get a penalty here, right? Probably the best race of his entire career. And now he was going to get summoned to the stewards for not keeping within 10 car lengths of the safety cars. These are a couple of examples here. Now, Ferrari believe he did this on 2 different occasions. Now, to me, it's like, look, is this really a big deal? Like, obviously, this could be a penalty, but also the amount of times we see one driver just, for example, Russell on Perez back in Austria, when Russell kind of, arguably, you can argue whether he pushed him off track or not. Whatever your opinion on that incident is, Russell got a 5-second penalty for, kind of ruining Perez's race that weekend. And that is a pretty common occurrence when one driver has an incident and forces another driver off. Of course, Latifi, not a 5-second penalty here, but a 5-place penalty at the next race. But, seemingly for those instances, you kind of get relatively small penalties, but potentially you can get major ones for not being so close to the safety car, right? So the idea is here, Perez is dropping back so he can go through these final couple of corners of the track with a lot of energy, really heat up those tyres. And, of course, they want to make sure the cars don't do this. So you have to stay within 10 car lengths of the safety car, and also the cars behind you have to stay within 10 car lengths of the car in front. This another example here on a different part of the track where this is also occurring. So they believe that there was kind of a couple of instances here, Ferrari, where Perez was not technically respecting the rules. Now, in this instance, right, like, is that 10 car lengths? It's kind of tough to say. When you're in the cockpit there, you're looking out, you can't really see much. Like, how do you really judge 10 car lengths? And also, does it really matter at the end of the day? Did it really have a material outcome or material consequence on the result of the race? I would argue not really. And I think there is some previous precedent set. It depends which instance you look at before. I think some have maybe got penalties for this in the past and some haven't. So it's a bit of an interesting one. But at Red Bull were relatively confident they were going to get away with it here. And Ferrari, though, came out and said, and even Sky Germany were apparently saying that he was going to get a 5-second penalty per kind of safety car infringement. If there'd have been less safety cars, it'd have been a different story because Perez would have won very easily, I think, regardless. But yeah, as it turned out, they reckoned a 2 times 5-second penalty. That, of course, would have given him a 10-second demand penalty, which would have put him 2.5 seconds behind Leclerc. Even Binotto said to the media, in 2 different safety cars, Perez made the same mistake. We expect a penalty of at least 10 seconds. They said, like, for sure, they need to penalise him by at least 10 seconds, 5 seconds per situation. We are sorry that a decision wasn't made already in the race, because then Charles pushed and consumed the front tyres, saying that he probably could have been closer if he protected those tyres a little bit more. But as it turns out, after Perez goes to the stewards to see what was going on here, he turns up, and they apparently have told him, at least in terms of what Alberto Ferrari is currently saying, that Perez says there's no issue with the stewards, and he will be indeed declared the winner. So from our present understanding as of recording, Perez is indeed the winner after all is said and done. Great race, of course, from him, and a very important race from a couple of different perspectives as well, especially in terms of the championship points, because now Ferrari are, obviously they're not getting closer to Red Bull. Max Verstappen just needs to win the next race and get the fastest lap, I believe, to be guaranteed to be the World Championship crowns next time out in Japan. But Mercedes, after a really bad race for them, decent qualifying for Hamilton at least, they had a decent car, it seems, on Saturday, not so much here on Sunday. They are now a long way behind Ferrari in the constructors. They will have a very hard time getting P2 with only 5 races to go. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.